Greetings. This is an introduction to the for loop in Java. The for loop is a construct that will allow you to repeat several Java statements over and over again in a loop. So here's a sample program I've written that just displays the word hi. I've run it, and there you can see in the console it's displayed hi. If you didn't know how to loop, the natural way to repeat this statement would be to copy and paste. So if I wanted to repeat it 5 times, I'd just copy and paste it 5 times, and it would display hi 5 times. This is not a good general solution to the problem of how do we get Java statements to repeat. So instead, let me show you how you would do it using this loop. Don't worry that you don't know what this means yet. I will explain how all the parts work in a moment. But you can see when I run it that now, even though I only have one print statement, it actually is displaying 5 times. And if you like to guess about how code works, you might guess that if I changed this to 10, it would display 10 times, and you would be right. There we are. I change it to 100, it displays 100 times. Okay, so let's go through step by step what all this up here means and why it actually results in looping 5 times. Because these other parts, besides the number 5, mean something. Before we do, let me add a few more lines so that it will be more evident the order in which these lines execute. So I'm going to have it print hi there. And then when it's done, I'll have it display done. Okay, so I'm going to run this code in something called debug mode, which is a way of letting us run the code one step at a time. And the execution order will be the same as if it were running full speed, only I can control it one step at a time so that we can see what's happening. All right, so I've run it. You see the green highlighting means that we're paused on that line. So there's 3 main parts to the for loop that control how it works. The first part there, you initialize a variable that's used to count how many times you've gone through the loop. The second part is a test that lets you decide whether or not you should loop one more time. If that test is true, the for loop will do another loop. If the test is false, it will exit the loop. The third part is called the update step. It's used to update the value of the variable, and it runs once per loop. So let me show you now how this is going to work. First, we declare a variable I, and we assign the value 0 to it. I'm going to keep track of the value of that variable off here to the right-hand side. I recommend that if you're a new programmer, you do this yourself on a piece of paper until you understand these structures well enough that you can do it in your head. So the initializer runs first. This only runs once at the very beginning of the loop. Then we run that middle statement, the test. Is I less than 5? Well, since I is 0 right now, that's true. And when it's true, we execute the block of code. When I say block of code, I mean all the lines between these 2 curly braces. So let's watch what happens. The test was true, so it prints hi, it prints there, and then it jumps back up to the top because it got to the closing brace, and that's what happens in a for loop. It will loop back up to the top here. At this point, it runs the update step. So it takes the value of I, and I add 1 to it, and then we do the test again. So now I is 1. I say, is I less than 5? It's true, and so we go through another loop. All right, I'm back up here. I do the update step. Now I is 2. I test it. It's still less than 5, so I do it again. I do the update step. I do the test. It repeats the loop. I do the update step. I do the test. It repeats the loop. Okay, now the value of I is 4. So when we do the update step, we take I, which is 4, we add 1, we assign it back to I, so now I is 5. And then when we do the test, it's not true anymore that I is less than 5, because I is equal to 5. So when that test is false, it exits the loop. And watch where it goes. It skips the inside of the loop, the body of the loop, and it goes to the first line that's after the closing brace of the loop. And so it prints I'm done, and that's the end of the program. So that's how the for loop works. Something that will help you see how it works is, if you wanted to, you could actually even print the value of I, and that would display what's happening. So when I run it now, you see the first time through the loop I is 0, so it displays 0. Then the second time through the loop I is 1, so it displays 1, all the way up to I'm done. So let's start tinkering with these pieces. If I wanted to have it start at 3, and I run it, try and predict what's going to happen. Just think about it for a second. Well, here's what actually happens. It displays 3 and then 4 and then I'm done. And the reason I think is clear if we step through it. So for the first step, I initializes to 3. We do the test. 3 is less than 5. And so you do the print statement. Then it does the update step. So now I is 4. It does the test to see if it's less than 5, and it prints it again. So it's wrong to say that this number is how many times it loops. It's more accurate to think about this is the starting number, this is the test to see if we're done yet, and this is how we update it every time. Let's make the test to see if I is less than 20, so we're going to loop up to 20. You know what, I want it to be equal to 20 also, so I'm going to start at 3, I'm going to keep looping as long as I is less than or equal to 20, and I'm going to add 1 every time. So now you see it actually displays when I is 20, because this isn't going to be false, the test isn't going to be false until I equals 21. What happens if we make this I equals I plus 2? Think about that for a second. You can see in the display, every single time it loops, instead of adding 1 to I goes up by 2. And so we're printing all the odd numbers from 3 to 19. So you can experiment around with this if you want to. Maybe a good self-test would be to think about how would you make a program that counts down from 100 to 0 and then prints blast off. Why don't you give that exercise a try right now? All right, here's my solution. So I'm going to start I at 100, because that's what I want it to start printing at. And I want it to go down by 1 every time instead of up by 1 every time, because I'm counting down. So I'll make this I equals I minus 1. Okay, what test do I need here? I need this test to be true until it gets down to 0, because that's when I want it to stop. So I think I'm going to test to see if I is larger than 0. And it's going to print the numbers, and then at the end, I want it to print blast off. Okay, let's see. Ooh, maybe 100 was too large. Let's start with 20. So it'll be a countdown from 20. All right, 20, 19, 18, all the way down to 1, and blast off. If we wanted to include 0, we could test as long as I was greater than or equal to 0. Because that means if it's true that it's equal to 0, it will go through another loop. And it's not false until I is -1, and then you would exit. So if I run it now, it counts all the way down to 0. Just as a test, you might have done this already, but what if we'd left this way? I is 20, the test is I is less than 0. It just printed blast off. Think for a minute about why that would be true. So again, if you think about the step-by-step process that the for loop uses, first it initializes I to 20, and then right away it does the test to see if it should loop. And the test is I less than 0? In this case, the answer is no, because I is 20. So because the test is false, it immediately exits the loop without having gone through it even once. So be aware that it really will do what you're telling it to do in these 3 steps, and you have to think very carefully about what exact sequence of things you want to occur. Let's do one last example. This is an example of how you could have it display a table of values for a function. So let's have I count up again. I'll start at 0. I'll have it go up to, let's just have it go up to 5. And I'll add 1 every time. By the way, There's a shorthand for I equals I plus 1. If I just say I plus plus, that's the exact same thing. So I could do I equals I plus 1, or I could do I plus plus. Something you should not do is this. This does not mean add 1 to I. Okay, so I'll do I plus plus, and this just means add 1 to I. So instead of printing just I, I'm going to print I followed by... I want to find the values for the function x squared plus 1. Except actually my variable here is I, so I'll say I squared plus 1. So I'll print the value for I, and then over here I'll calculate what is I squared plus 1. I'm going to have a temporary variable to store my answer to this. This is not strictly necessary. So I times I, that's I squared, and I'll add 1. So now inside the loop it does these calculations, it stores the answer into answer, and then I can print answer. I'm going to make it print lines, so that they display on different lines. And I'm not going to print blast off at the end. And I think maybe before the loop starts, I'll have it display I, and then \t means tab, and then I squared plus 1, because this is going to show the user what it is that these numbers actually mean. Alright, so when I run it, ooh, this looks kind of ugly in the output here because I only have a space. Let's make a tab in the output also. Okay. Alright, great. So now when I run it, you see it's got a little table where it shows you the value of I, and then it shows you what you'd get if you plugged I into the equation I squared plus 1. And it goes from I starting at 0 up to 4. But if we wanted to, we could just as well go up to 50. And there we go. And so this shows you the value of the function all the way up to I equals 50. So it's a very powerful way to do math. Let's see, do we want to do anything else with this? Yeah, let me show you one thing. So I created this temporary variable called answer that I was using to store what I squared plus 1 was equal to. This is such a small calculation that it's really not necessary. Instead, I can just do the calculation right here inside the print statement. So now it's going to display I, and then a tab, and then the result of the evaluation of that expression. And if I run it, you see it's giving me the same results. Well, that's it. That's your introduction to for loops. Good luck with the problem set.